It may sound like a broken record, but the Seahawks have an offensive line problem. And if it wasn't already evident, it certainly was center stage in Sunday's loss to the Rams. We're going to be breaking it all down here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s who are listening in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it, whether you're tuning in from Fargo, North Dakota, or if you are over in Lansing, Michigan. We appreciate each and every one of you. The Seahawks dropping to 4-5 and last place in the NFC West with another disappointing loss, a game that it felt like the Seahawks gave up more than lost outright, a 26-20 defeat to the Rams in overtime. It's certainly been tough sledding for Mike Macdonald's squad. We are going to be taking a deeper look at that defeat at Lumen Field in our Monday Musings segment. We're bringing back the mailbag. We got tons of questions from you, our valued listeners. We'll answer as many as we can and much more. Today's episode is brought your way by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Yesterday was certainly not a pretty game for the Seahawks, losing 26-20 in overtime to the Los Angeles Rams. And there's a number of culprits you can point to. Geno Smith had 3 interceptions in this football game, 2 of them coming in the red zone, one of those being returned 106 yards for a touchdown that gave the Rams a 20-13 lead. Defensively, there were some key penalties that extended drives for the Rams in the second half so that they could put more points on the board and make their comeback from 10 down at halftime. But at the end of the day, you don't want to just highlight one position group, but we have to. That's the way that reality is, and film doesn't lie. Rob, the Seattle Seahawks, stop me if you've heard this before, the Seattle Seahawks have an offensive line problem, and it wasn't more evident than it was yesterday. 59% pressure rate in this game, according to NFL Next Gen stats. The film backs that up. It just felt like Geno Smith was under constant duress. And we're not talking holding onto the ball and then pressures. Like, we're talking instant pressures coming from that offensive line. The run game had a bunch of runs that went well, and then they had a bunch of runs, short yardage, that they got stuffed, notably 3rd and 4th down in overtime. It just feels like this offensive line is what is holding this football team back, and it's leading to all these other miscues by the skill players. It is a domino effect that starts in the trenches.
Yeah, there's no question about it, Corbin. I mean, it's basically been an issue for, feels like, generations now in Seattle, that their offensive line has held the team back. But it feels especially true this year, considering the fact that you made the investments that the Seahawks have made along the offensive line. Obviously, the selection of Christian Haynes in the draft, the signing of the center Connor Williams was a celebrated move. I mean, you're talking about a Pro Bowl player that comes to Seattle now and can't snap the ball accurately, is getting blown up by rookie defensive tackles and practice squad players in the loss a week ago. It has been just absolutely frustrating. And again, I think one of the reasons that it's been easy for some to pass off is because you know that you're working on your 3rd and 4th right tackles. That said, George Fant did get onto the field in this football game, and he got pushed back. Certainly Mike Jarrell got pushed back. The right guard position has just been atrocious. And as I mentioned before, at center, Connor Williams, a player that you thought was like in some ways is going to be kind of the saving grace of this squad, instead has been one of the biggest misses so far for this team. So, yeah, all the numbers that you mentioned before, I think, really paint a picture of why the Seahawks offense has been as inconsistent as it has. There's one more out there, and that's 7. That's how many sacks the Seahawks gave up to a fairly middling LA Rams defense. And, of course, this was a game played at home. There's a reason why the Seahawks have won 1 of their last 6 football games, and that is because this offensive line just does not provide enough passing protection or run blocking for Seattle skill position players to be able to actually, demonstrate that skill.
And this is not some overnight phenomenon. As you said, it feels like this offensive line has been a problem point for the Seahawks for more than a decade. And if it feels that way, it's because really that is a truthful statement for the most part. And this group, I don't think this is a hot take at this point. I think this is the worst offensive line that the Seahawks have put on the field in the John Schneider era at this point. I think that it is the worst that they have put out there, and the stats bear it out. The film bears it out. Is there time for them to turn the corner? Sure, but just a few stats to throw out there that I think are noteworthy. Today, Ben Solak of ESPN posted this tweet. The Seahawks right now, their average third down, 8.9 yards to gain. That is the worst mark since 1980. I mean, think about how many years. I mean, that's basically the entire Seahawks existence that the NFL has not had a team that has been that bad. And this is the one that I unearthed today. Ken Walker III has 103 rushing yards before contact in 6 games this year. That is 17.1 yards before contact per game. That is the most damning stat as far as I'm concerned. I mean, just for some comparison, Derrick Henry is averaging 49 rushing yards per game before contact. Saquon Barkley is averaging 48. Even Bijan Robinson, who's had some O-line issues in front of him at times this year, he's averaging 26. 26 to 17 is still a pretty significant difference when you're talking on a per-game basis. And this is not new. Ken Walker III averaged 17.5 yards per game before contact last year, and the line was not good last season. So you're seeing these patterns, and I thought Geno Smith could have been sacked double-digit times yesterday, the way things were going. It just felt like the Rams, and give them credit, their front line. I mean, Braden Fisk against Anthony Bradford, that was no contest this entire game. He made Fisk look like Aaron Donald in this game. And on the outside, Jared Verse was way too much for Mike Jarrell. And I'm going to give Mike Jarrell a pass because I think he is playing the best of his ability right now. You're talking about a guy that is a Division II player that is supposed to be developmental. And because of injuries, you were forced to throw him in the lineup. And there's been some positive plays, but he has shown he's a 6th-round pick coming from Findlay University, and teams are exploiting that right now. So I'm not going to pick on the rookie, but Anthony Bradford, PFF credited him for 1 sack yesterday. I think you could have credited him for 3. He was terrible in pass protection. The run blocking was not there. Connor Williams was throwing snaps all over the place. Again, Geno caught a bunch of them that were way to his left late in the game. The snaps continue to be a big issue. The 4th and 1 run in overtime, that play was dead from the outset because Connor Williams drove 2 yards off the ball immediately into the backfield. You can't win when you're doing that. And 7 of the 8 blockers lost on that play, Rob. I mean, it's really hard to watch. And again, it feels like a broken record because this has been going on for a long time, but you can't ask your quarterback to, play better football than what Geno Smith did yesterday with the circumstances. You certainly can't ask Ken Walker III to do more, or Zach Charbonnet, when you're getting the ball and there's 3 guys in the backfield every single play. This offensive line is what is holding this football team back from reaching its potential. And I just don't know that they can get a fix that's going to be able to turn their season around there with the personnel they have.
No, and unfortunately, I have to agree with you on that. We, of course, always strive to be positive on this show. And I think that the positive is that you're hoping that you're going to get Abraham Lucas back at that right tackle position. He is just a better pass protector than anybody else the Seahawks have at the right tackle spot. And he certainly would be a massive upgrade in terms of run blocking. But that's a healthy Abraham Lucas. I was expecting a healthy George Fant to be able to give the Seahawks a little bit more punch, again, both in the passing game and the run blocking in this particular contest. And when Fant got on the field again, he was as disappointing in his play as Jarrell was. That's why Jarrell started the game and why he finished the game. George Fant was in there only for a little bit during the late first quarter, early second quarter. before Jarrell got put back onto the field. That is what is so damn frustrating about watching the Seahawks offensive line. It just feels like they, when you have one player make a small step forward, then you have 3 or 4 others taking a huge step back. I've talked to, many times so far this season, Corbin, where we have, harped on the inability of the Seahawks to play any kind of run defense in a game in which Seattle did bring the physicality and the run defense, that they were able to get Matthew Stafford off of his spot. They were able to create some big plays on defense. Again, the offense, just especially the offensive line, was not able to hold up its end of the bargain. And so it's like the comparison about it doesn't really matter how pretty a car is in terms of its paint job or how good it sounds. If the damn thing doesn't start, then nothing else matters. If the Seahawks cannot protect their skill position talent, then it really doesn't matter what else happens during the rest of the football game. Obviously, you need to be able to score points consistently to win in the NFL, and the Seahawks' inability to do that is basically what has plummeted any chances of them even having that playoff kind of conversation.
Yep, they don't get this figured out, their playoff chance. I mean, they're only one game out of first place still after this loss, but those playoff chances are going to evaporate like Geno Smith's pocket if they do not get this figured out here in the near future. Luckily, they do have a bye week, so they have some additional time to try to comb through stuff and see if they can figure out a solution. When we come back, we're going to tackle your questions on our Monday mailbag. As many questions we can answer here on our show. You're listening to Locked On Seahawks. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing increases risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. This episode is also brought your way by Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, Prize Picks is just you against the numbers. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform that offers an injury insurance policy. So your lineups stay in play. Even if one of your players gets banged up, your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. And Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you still can cash out your lineup even if it isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support. Let's get to our Monday mailbag. We didn't get to have one last week, but we're opening back the mailbag up. We got some really good questions. Obviously, a lot of questions about this team coming out of this football game yesterday against the Rams. First one here that we have for you, Robin, and this is actually just NFL in general. I think this is an excellent question coming from Mike C. from New Jersey. The game has gotten too fast for officials. Do you feel that somehow the replay review booth should get involved, correcting some of these calls and non-calls? For example, give each team a third coach's challenge that they can use specifically for penalties.
I do. I think that what the NFL really should do is some of the other things that we've seen in the Canadian Football League, the XFL, even in college football in some cases. But I think ultimately what it really comes down to is I think that there should be basically an eye in the sky that is going to allow the most egregious penalties that we all, when we see it happen live, we're like, that seems questionable. And then you see a replay and it's just obvious that was a terrible penalty. I think about the Minnesota Vikings, for example, with Sam Darnold had his helmet basically ripped off to the side, and they was unable to call the actual face mask penalty that should have resulted in that football game. I think about the pass interference or defensive holding call that the Seahawks actually were very fortunate that came through where Witherspoon was called for pass interference or hold. I can't remember which of the two, but the point is that it was not a penalty. There was the player that Coby Bryant played beautiful defense that they initially penalized before they correctly huddled up and figured it out. Even when they huddle up and correct it, however, it's such a time suck. And I really think that there should be some more efficient way in which there's so many different people who are getting paid, who knows how many dollars for the NFL. There should be somebody who is watching that could basically radio down, do a real quick replay, and correct these penalties that are just dogging the game at this point.
Our next question here from Theron Olson. How many offensive linemen drafted by John Schneider have been elected to the Pro Bowl? How many made the Pro Bowl after leaving Seattle? And what is the total amount of drafted offensive linemen that have been given a second contract? So the second question there, as far as players that made the Pro Bowl leaving Seattle, don't hold me to this, but I don't remember anybody leaving the Seahawks that was drafted by John Schneider, like Jermaine Ifedi, for just one example, going elsewhere and becoming a Pro Bowler. I don't think that has happened. There have been some players like Mark Lewinsky that found some success starting elsewhere, but not to the level where they were Pro Bowlers. Russell Okung is the only offensive lineman that John Schneider has drafted. It was literally his first draft pick in 2010. It's the only offensive lineman he's drafted that has been a Pro Bowler since 2010. And as far as second contracts go, they did give Ethan Posick a 1-year contract. Russell Okung didn't get a second contract, though. I'm trying to think if there were any others. That Justin Britt got a second contract and lasted a year into that before the torn ACL. So no, there has not been success in that front. So if you want to take shots at John Schneider about the offensive line drafting and developing of players, look, as Rob likes to say, the proof is in the pudding. The evidence is there. You have not been able to develop Pro Bowl caliber players, and you haven't been able to develop players that you are at least willing to pay and keep around for a second contract. Damian Lewis is having a great year in Carolina, and the Seahawks were not willing to pay him that price. So it's been tough sledding for the general manager and the front office in general with this offensive line. Our next question here from Jason Yee. Has Coby Bryant done enough to solidify himself as the full-time starter alongside Julian Love for the rest of this season? That's whether Rayshon Jenkins gets back soon or not, Rob. Do you think that we have reached that territory with Coby Bryant?
I think we're starting to at least have that conversation. Look, I still am a big fan of Rayshon Jenkins, and I think that he deserves an opportunity. I'm also excited about the flashes that we've seen from Jarek Reed on special teams as well. I think that he deserves opportunity, but there's no question about it. Coby Bryant, his physicality, the instincts, we are seeing him really blossom on defense. To me, he has been one of the big winners of Mike McDonald, taking over with this squad. We saw flashes of it, but Coby Bryant was asked to play so many different roles in Pete Carroll's defense, and now it feels like he is absolutely getting more comfortable just being in that safety spot. So I do think that certainly Coby Bryant's got to be the favorite at this point to be the starter for the rest of the season, but I'm not going to hand a starting position to anybody when you have a defense that continues to give up yardage the way that this does. There are some missed tackles on tape that you don't always see in the TV copy with Coby Bryant. He can be very, very aggressive with his pursuit angles and kind of leave his teammates out to dry at times. But again, there's no question about it. In terms of the way he punches at the ball every time he makes a tackle, the closing speed that he is showing, and then his ability to create a turnover in terms of his interception possibilities as well. All of those are reasons why I think that he should be the starter for the most part moving forward. Again, giving Rayshon Jenkins and Jarek Reed opportunity to compete. But again, I think that Coby Bryant is probably the most likely starter.
Our next question coming from Hawks in Houston. What must happen to get the Seahawks to take drafting and attracting vets for the O-line more seriously? Is our current talent recruitment and development system completely broken? So look, I will back at the wording of that question for just a second. It hasn't been the lack of investment in the draft. I mean, we saw Charles Cross get picked in the first 10 picks a few years ago. Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes are mid-round picks. And Rob, you and I talked about this last week. Those players you are expecting to be starters if you're picking them in the third and fourth round. You are expecting those players to be guys that can play early. And we have not seen that. The development standpoint, though, something's got to give on that front. And you and I, we've had this discussion for a number of years. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, hey, go out and pay some money for a big-time guard. It hasn't happened. The Seahawks have not been willing to do that. You know, maybe this is that final straw that has to, drop, or in straw case, get burned, where you realize, maybe we need to make some changes to how we handle business. Because I can tell you this, Rob, if the season does not turn around and the offensive line is not able to play better in the second half of the season, I think that there could be some things going on behind the scenes in terms of John Schneider. I'm not saying that he's on the hot seat, but I could see some discussions like, hey, we already moved on from Pete Carroll because he wasn't meeting expectations. If you can't put an offensive line out there that is good enough to protect our really good skill players and have them play to their full potential, then we may have to do something on that front. So I do think there's got to be some changes systematically with how they're evaluating linemen and just the way they prioritize that position with the money that they spend. Our last question here for Rob. This one coming from Salva Trucco, and this is the question a lot of fans are asking. With Geno having his worst outing so far as a Seahawk, is there any chance that we finally get to see Sam Howell and what he can do?
I think, again, we talked about this before, Corbin, with DK Metcalf and all the criticism of DK Metcalf. And we're seeing how bad the Seahawks are playing with DK Metcalf on the field. Seahawks fans who are asking to see Sam Howell, be careful what you wish for. I don't know that any quarterback in the history of the NFL could be much more effective than what Geno Smith has been, considering just the inability to have any type of reasonable pass protection. And so, again, I'm as excited as anybody about Sam Howell. I really liked him coming out of North Carolina. I thought he was going to be a steal for the Washington Commanders when they selected him in the 5th round. Was not at all surprised that he proved himself to be at least an average starting quarterback for a Washington team that, frankly, had not much talent around him. At the same time, again, I just do not believe that Sam Howell is going to walk in and suddenly the Seahawks are going to be just humming on offense. I really do believe that this is more of a problem from the center to the right side of the offensive line than it has anything to do with the quarterback. That said, I am a believer in Sam Howell. I do believe that there are plenty of reasons to criticize Geno Smith. I just don't believe that it's the magic pixie dust that is suddenly going to get the Seahawks back on the winning track by having any type of switch at the quarterback position.
Yeah, if you think that Geno Smith is having problems with decision-making, with what's going on in front of him in pass protection, just remember that Sam Howell led the league in interceptions last year and took 65 sacks last season. And not that he can't be a good starting quarterback. It's just, this doesn't seem like a good situation for his development to just chuck him in with the way this offensive line is playing. And watching the All-22, and, Geno Smith made his mistakes. There were some bad decisions, but I felt better about his performance watching the tape, just considering what was going on in front of him and the fact that he rebounded from those picks and then led the team on a game-tying drive. He had him down in position to get at least 3 points, and then they ran the ball 4 straight plays. They took the ball out of his hands and got stuffed. So there's a lot of different variables here, but I do not think I like the magic pixie dust comparison there, because if teams or fans are looking for that to be kind of the thing that's going to get this offense clicking, changing quarterbacks, I think you should be careful what you wish for on that front with this offensive line. Up next, we are going to dish out our Monday musings, some key takeaways after watching the film, revisiting yesterday's loss to the Rams. We'll look at some positives and negatives when we come back here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Hillsdale College. History, economics, the great works of literature. Did you study these things in school? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Regardless, it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free, that's right, 40 free online courses, including Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and a brand new documentary-style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to register. This episode is also brought your way by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need in the place that you make your same live bets. It's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page when you place your bets. Bet on everything from Ken Walker III having a rushing touchdown against the 49ers in a couple weeks at Levi's Stadium, or DK Metcalf returning from injury with a 30-plus yard reception. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks, unfortunately, are now in last place in the NFC West, losing their 5th game in 6 tries, a 26-20 overtime defeat to the Rams. 4 straight losses at Lumen Field. We have beaten that subject like a dead horse, so we're not going to dive into that necessarily today, the home field struggles. But looking back at yesterday's game, Rob, we've talked so much about how poorly the offensive line played. That was an entire segment on the show. But there were positives in this game on the offensive side of the football, in particular, 2 wide receivers, one being a former first-round pick and one being a practice squad player, that both went out impressed in this contest.
Yeah, no question about it. I think we have to, if you want to have the conversation about positives, then I think that the ascension of Jackson Smith and Jigba in the way that he played in this football game, of course, 7 catches, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. Look, I mean, he was just terrific at times in this football game. I especially really appreciated the catch and run where he broke 3 different tackles, just showing off a little bit more of the lateral agility, the spatial awareness, and just the flat-out determination that at times we have not seen from very many of Seattle's skill position players when they're in the open field. It does feel like, other than DK Metcalf just running right on by people rather than through people, as you expect for a receiver of his size, that there just hasn't been much physicality from Seattle's pass catcher. So that was good to see from Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then it just kind of warms your heart to see a player like Cody White get his opportunities and to make them make the best of those opportunities. It reminded me of what we had seen in the last year or so with Jake Bobo, who, by the way, seems like he's just absolutely disappeared off of the face of the earth in terms of Seattle's offense. I hate to switch back into the negativity, but at the same time, I was very excited about the positive, changes that we've seen from Seattle's pass catchers. The fact that we have to reach that far to find these kind of positives, again, is kind of a statement about the state of affairs right now in Seattle.
Yeah, Cody White had a couple of really nice catches in this game. And it's unfortunate because the one that he had in overtime, the deep ball that he caught along the sideline, if he could have kept himself in bounds, he's probably gone. And the Seahawks are walking off with their own 6-point win. But momentum was carrying him out of bounds. That was a very difficult play for him to be able to do that, just to be able to keep his feet in bounds there and tiptoe along it. It was still a great play. He had a 16-yard catch that he created a lot of yards after the catch. You want to talk about a guy that broke some tackles. Cody White's got good size, and he did that. And Jackson Smith and Jigba should have had 250 receiving yards in this game. A couple of holds on Mike Jarrell took 2 long completions away. So he still finished with 180, easily a career high. Had a fantastic performance, the best of his career so far. I'll let you have those positives. I'm going to go back to a subject that, you know what, I'm 35, but I feel like I'm 60 when I start thinking about this run game, the way that it is making me feel that aged watching the tape. Just conceptually, I don't know what it is, Rob. It feels like the cohesiveness and just the understanding of the schemes is not there in the run game. There are so many plays, and you could pick out a bunch of them yesterday. Week before we talked about this. I just keep having to bring it up because it's just shocking to me that we are seeing guys that don't look like they understand what they are supposed to be doing on certain plays. It seems like sometimes these guys are allergic to hitting guys wearing other colors. I don't know where that is coming from, but conceptually and physicality wise, this run game is just extremely dysfunctional. And you look at the 3rd and 4th down runs the Seahawks had in overtime specifically. The 3rd down run, which was a split zone concept, that 3rd down run they were able to earlier in the game have some success with. But on this particular one, almost the entire offensive line got whipped. And Connor Williams was not able to work off the combo block to get the second level. Jarrett Verse beat a double team and was able to shoot in the backfield. There's just every single run play, it feels like there's something that is broken down, that is not being executed properly, or there's something conceptually that isn't working out. It's real, being a guy that's a run game purist that has coached the run game, like I said, that is the thing watching Seahawks tape right now that is just exhausting, because it just doesn't feel like, even when there were some positive runs yesterday, you still don't feel like things are really getting that much better.
Right, agreed. And that's the thing is that I know that we want to talk about the offensive line, early on, but I got to kind of go back to that idea just for a moment, Corbin. Like, I was especially frustrated on the defense, again, on the offensive line at the right guard position. We've talked so much about Mike Giroux, talked a lot about Connor Williams. I want to talk about Anthony Bradford for a moment. When it was announced that Christian Haynes, Seattle's 3rd round pick, was not even active for this football game, a healthy scratch. That's very rare. Of course, we know that Seattle has been rotating the two of them. I thought, okay, Anthony Bradford, you must have had yourself an incredible week of practice. The coaches are clearly using this as a motivational tactic. They're basically saying, this is your game, man. Now take it over. And instead, for him to get beaten as often as he did, it felt like at that point the Seahawks had almost kind of tricked themselves. And I mention that because that's what it feels like, the way that they're calling plays. That there is nothing that they do very well, so they're just kind of throwing up a whole bunch of stuff up against the wall and just figure, on 1st and 10, we're going to try this style, outside zone. This time, we're going to try the inside zone. This time, we're going to try just pure power. It's like you got to focus in on the one thing that you do well before you're going to do any of them very well. And that, to me, is the frustrating part, is that it feels like Seattle is just trying to make things up as they go. Some would argue that is kind of the logical way that from a college offense, or at least a team that has had some success at the college game, to suddenly go to the NFL, they're going to have these type of struggles. But it definitely is getting frustrating. And for it to be some of your young players that you've invested early draft picks and not see any type of fruit of their labor, so to speak, then that just makes it that much more frustrating.
Looking at the defensive side of the football, as promised, there were positives in this game. So I'm going to wrap up my takes here today with a positive. And I wrote an article about this today, and I asked Mike McDonald about this today. Josh Jobe has exhausted his 3 practice squad elevations. If he is going to play anymore, the Seahawks are going to have to get a spot on the 53-man roster for him. And yesterday, Mike McDonald made it sound like there was an issue with Trey Brown still not being healthy, and that they were trying to make sure that he was all the way back from his ankle injury. But look, I think right now Mike McDonald is trying to live up to the philosophy that he is trying to pass down. He's trying to have this reverberate in the locker room, and Cody White could be another example of this. If you play well in practice, you earn opportunities, and you play well in games, we're going to play you. We are going to give you opportunities. And Josh Jobe, all that he has done in these 3 starts, Rob, he is according to Pro Football Focus, he is in the top 5 in the NFL right now among qualified corners, have at least 100 coverage snaps. He's in the top 5 in coverage, completion percentage allowed, 46% in these 3 games. He is in the top 5 for quarterback rating. It's 46.1 against him through 3 games. And he is 14th in forced incompletion rate. He had another pass breakup yesterday. I thought the defensive pass interference against him was kind of ticky-tack, to be honest with you. I thought it looked like it was just two guys that incidentally got tangled up. I have been really impressed by him and Coby Bryant, and both these guys earned these opportunities in part due to injuries, but also because for Josh Jobe as a practice squad guy to just kind of pass over some of the other players in the roster. Nehemiah Pritchett with a healthy scratch yesterday. Josh Jobe earned that opportunity, and Mike Macdonald is rewarding him. I think that is maybe one of the big positives for this year is that you are seeing that whole idea of competition that Pete Carroll, had all these years. I think that Mike Macdonald's got his own way of doing it, and he is rewarding those guys. Josh Jobe, in my opinion, should be the starter moving forward until he plays poor enough that you have to make a move and put Trey Brown back in. Go with a hot hand. He has earned this opportunity.
He has earned this opportunity. He's a good football player. And my final thing that I'll mention here is just Ernest Jones has been every bit the game changer that the Seahawks were hoping for when they made that switch. Made that trade, of course, with the Tennessee Titans. It was fun to see him bring some physicality, bring some instincts, bring just some nastiness and desire back to the Seahawks defense. I thought that was one of the biggest reasons why they found themselves in a football game in which, frankly, they had no reason to be in this game with this putrid as the offensive line played. The defense did play significantly better. If you want something to hang your hat on, I do believe that this is a defense that's starting to kind of turn the corner a little bit and really be a unit that can help the Seahawks offense get going.
As always, you can follow me at X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we will have Tell the Truth Tuesday, and we are going to be taking a look at some mid-season awards. And yes, it will be some positive, and there's going to be some negative because guess what? The Seahawks are 4-5. So we are going to have our mid-season awards. That'll be dropping on tomorrow's episode. Make sure that you are listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.